Do you remember the Game Boy? The giant gray brick that could? It may not be pretty, the games may not have color, and the screen may not have any lighting, but the Game Boy compensated for all of its weaknesses with durability, affordability, and a great selection of games. So let's talk a little bit about the launch games, arguably the most famous of which is Super Mario Land. Or maybe Tetris. Probably Tetris. I mainly want to look at Mario Land today, but let's take a quick look at the other games too. Alleyway was first released on April 21st, 1989, and features in all the launch lineups for the Game Boy. It's a clone of an old Atari game called Breakout, which initially released on May 13th, 1976. Wow, really cutting edge here. So what do? Well, I'll tell you. You control a paddle, and you have a few balls that you try to bounce back and forth to destroy some bricks. You have to avoid having the ball fall off of the bottom of the screen, or you lose it, and you only have a few of them. If you destroy all the bricks, you get to go to the next stage. As you move through more stages, they'll change things up on you with moving bricks, or collapsing ceilings, or the bonus level where you get to destroy Mario. Okay, that's a little weird. You guys okay over there, Nintendo? Alleyway is an enjoyable time killer. It's pretty simple, but that's all you could really ask for at launch on the Game Boy anyway. It's not bad. Although the sound of the ball bouncing has been burned into my brain permanently. First there was tennis, then there was tennis, then there was tennis. Tennis initially released on May 29th, 1989 in Japan, but was featured at launch in the West. It's tennis, but on the Game Boy. You go back and forth playing tennis with a bot on various difficulty levels, while Mario judges. I feel like he's judging me. I'm not much of a sports person, but tennis is a simple enough thing for just about anyone to pick up and play. It's not going to give you the depth of an RPG like Pokemon would on the Game Boy, but then that's not really what this is for in the first place, is it? It's another good time killer for lunch breaks, bus rides, that sort of thing. I can't really complain, but I also can't really say much more than that. It does its job. Baseball initially released on April 21st, 1989, and it features in the Game Boy launch everywhere. So, to be honest with you, I don't really know much about baseball. I guess you want to score the most runs so you can win the game, but I don't really know much else. You hit a ball with a stick, or maybe you throw the ball at the guy with the stick. There's running involved, and bouncing balls. Geez, trying to play this game without understanding the sport makes me feel like I'm trying to read a language that I don't understand or something. I'm trying real hard to play this game.
But it's in Japanese!
Yakuman is a Japan-exclusive game released on April 21st, 1989. It's Mahjong, but on the Game Boy. Well, I hate to say it, but I don't know anything about Mahjong except for what I read on the internet. Hey, at least I admit it. This is a video game of Japanese Mahjong, as opposed to just regular Mahjong, which came from China. Since I don't know how to play Mahjong, I can't really say much about that. But apparently, Japanese Mahjong is a 4-player game. This game only has 2. So if you're hoping to get your accurate fix of Japanese Mahjong on the Game Boy, well, you better look again. Beyond that, I'd have to think this is probably fine. Lots of tabletop games I don't know how to play have been recreated in video game form. Nintendo found some success with this one, and it went on to spawn a series of Mahjong games. Even more games I don't know how to play. Holy crap, it's Tetris. The name speaks for itself. Unfortunately, it's being really quiet today, so I'm gonna run my mouth instead. Tetris released on June 14th, 1989 in Japan. Later, Nintendo made a huge deal about getting it as a pack-in game, and it became a launch game everywhere else. And it was a killer app for the Game Boy. What more could be said about this game? The falling blocks puzzle gameplay was hugely influential. Admittedly, Tetris may not be my preference in the genre. I prefer Dr. Mario or Kirby Star Stacker or Columns, but maybe I shouldn't be comparing Game Boy launch stuff to later Game Boy games, and certainly not to a full-blown Genesis game. But this was an instant classic, and the fans are still crazy for it. If you like the Game Boy at all, you gotta check this one out. Alright, you've seen the rest, now let's look at the best. Super Mario Land released on April 21st, 1989. It's the first Mario game to come out on the Game Boy. Of course, Mario is a ridiculously big deal, and they needed it to help sell the Game Boy for obvious reasons. But the Game Boy is a completely different beast compared to the NES, and this Mario game was not made by the usual suspects. Gunpei Yokoi, who was instrumental in creating the Game Boy, Metroid, and the Game & Watch, among a lot of other things, produced this game, and Nintendo R&D 1 developed it. However, Shigeru Miyamoto sat this one out. So it probably goes without saying that this one would end up being just a little bit different. I have a few thoughts. In terms of aesthetics, Super Mario Land vaguely looks like Super Mario Bros., but with Game Boy limitations. The graphics lack color, and the sprites are smaller to accommodate the Game Boy screen. The music also goes for a similar cheery vibe to the main Mario games. At the same time, though, some of these things are a little different. There's different game over and invincibility music. The sprites are small, and thus they lack some of the expressiveness of other Mario games. And, let's bring up the elephant in the room. We're not in the Mushroom Kingdom. There's no Peach. Mario is in Sarasa Land, saving Princess Daisy in her first appearance. And of all things, she was attacked by an alien named Tatanga. Yeah, this game's a little weird. It's a little out there. Throughout his adventure, Mario goes through a variety of environments like these Egyptian tombs or the Chai Kingdom. The environments are pretty basic, but they do enough little things with the enemies and little bits of art to try to help distinguish them. You might have to use your imagination a little bit, but for a launch Game Boy game, this is pretty impressive actually. The gameplay similarly resembles Super Mario Bros. It's pretty simple but enjoyable. You start out in your small form with 1 hit point. You can get a mushroom that makes you grow and you'll get another hit point. And if you get a third mushroom, you can get a projectile. If you get hit, you become small and go back to having 1 hit point. You have to do all that over again. At the end of a level, there are 2 exits. If you can reach the higher exit, you get to play a bonus game for extra lives or a power-up. You can go down pipes in various levels for bonus coins and other stuff. You get the idea. The basics are pretty similar to the NES Mario Bros. Game. But things are also a little different. 1-ups are hearts to give them a distinct look on the Game Boy's limited screen. Instead of the usual Koopas, this game has Koopas with exploding shells. Instead of the regular fireballs, you have the Power Ball, which bounces around like the ball in Alleyway. Strangely, there's even 2 levels that are shoot-'em-up style, instead of having something like water levels or something normal. Even the final level is one of them, so the final boss is fought that way. Why is the last level played with a completely different style of gameplay when most of the game is not like that? And again, this is far from the only game to do that. To go into the bosses more, the final boss is pretty much the only real fight. Most of the time, bosses are an obstacle you have to pass to get to Daisy at the end of the level, only for you to realize that actually it's not Daisy and you're going to have to go through another world, champ. This game has limited continues. While that's not that odd for gaming in general at that time, it is a little weird for Mario, since only this game and Super Mario Bros. 2 does this. Now, I think Super Mario Bros. 2 is way tougher, and it's definitely way longer, so I think that's a bit of a problem there, unless you already know the game. I played All-Stars to play through it. I think that this game is not that bad about it. Super Mario Bros. 2 is a lot longer, it's tougher, it's a weirder game in terms of how it works, and having that expectation of limited continues makes that game a huge ask for me. Super Mario Land is so nice and short and sweet and to the point that it's super easy to do it. There's only like 12 levels, it's like 45 minutes long. It's a lot more reasonable for what they're asking you for. And you can unlock more continues by getting a bunch of points, so the game will even reward you a little bit for getting better by giving you more tries. When it comes to the controls, well, I'm not the best with 2D platformers anyway. I wonder if the Retron 5 or maybe my TV introduced any lag into the equation. I've played through this before on my Game Boy Advance SP. I played it on the Retron 5 and recorded that for this video. Sometimes it feels a little wonky, but maybe I'm just clumsy. 2D games are not always my strong suit, admittedly. Sometimes I feel like I can't really get good momentum in this game. I need a good running start or something for a jump, but the controls won't always cooperate with me. It'll lead to me missing something that should have been pretty simple, like somehow I just can't control my momentum like I need to. Depending on what you play this game on, it could be hard for you to see anything because the sprites are absolutely tiny compared to other games. They clearly had the screen size in mind with that, but maybe they forgot that the screen is really hard to see on most Game Boys. Despite all the oddities and the occasional gripes I have, I think this game is very charming. To be honest, I had it when I was a kid, so I'm nostalgic for it too. But I do think it's good. It's a little wonky, but it's still an interesting novelty. I mean, it was a full-blown Mario on the Game Boy. Despite the rough limitations, I think it works better than it has any right to. And the game has a cozy charm to it that goes a long way in making the issues that are here seem relatively minor. While admittedly, this game is a little outdated and basic now, I think it's still very enjoyable. Though it's really different from a lot of the other games in the series, it's an interesting moment for the series. It would get a sequel called Super Mario Land 2: 6 Golden Coins. That game introduced Wario. That game got a sequel called Super Mario Land 3: Wario Land, and it starred Wario. That turned into the Wario Land series, which was 3 more games, and things just kept getting weirder and weirder. But more than anything, I think that uniqueness is what makes the Mario and Wario Land games so worthwhile. It's interesting to see the Mario games experiment as the developers were able to make these games their own thing. And I think that this game is a must-play for any fan of the Game Boy, if only to give you a better context to appreciate what the Game Boy would later accomplish. So, consider checking it out. Oh, by the way, if you want to do that, Nintendo Switch Online's emulation service unfortunately does not have this game, but it does have Super Mario Land 2 and Wario Land 3. So they may be worth checking out. Hopefully the rest of the series will be put up there sometime too. Well, I guess that's that then, isn't it? If you need me, I'll be playing something. If you have any thoughts or questions or ideas or anything you'd like to share, feel free to leave a comment. And if you liked this video, consider subscribing. More reviews will be coming in the future.